The wind carried a sharp scent of gunpowder and blood across the prairie. Smoke rose in twisting fingers above the scorched wagons, and a last echo of gunfire faded into the high desert like a funeral bell swallowed by distance. Buzzards wheeled above the carnage, already circling low. The massacre had lasted no more than 10 minutes, but it would be remembered by the bones left behind. Clara Hollis lay still in the brush, not daring to breathe too deeply. Her arms curled tight around the bundled weight of her infant son, Levi, whose muffled whimper had nearly betrayed them once already. Her dress, once a soft calico blue, was smeared with dust and blood, some of it hers, most of it not. A single strand of hair clung to her cheek, wet with sweat, and her fingers cramped around the knife she'd clutched since the first shot rang out. She couldn't hear any more voices. No hoots, no cruel laughter, just the wind whispering through the grass like a ghost. Levi stirred, sucking air in tiny, hitching breaths. Clara shifted him beneath her shawl and kissed the crown of his head. "Shoo, baby," she breathed, her voice barely more than a gust. "They're gone. I think they're gone." But she didn't move. She waited. 5 more heartbeats. 10. Then, like a deer after thunder, she lifted her head by inches and peered through the reeds. The world beyond had changed. 20 wagons gone, burned, pillaged. She could still see them in her mind's eye. Children playing by the wheels, the old man tuning his fiddle, the preacher reading by lantern light. Her friend Mary laughing as she boiled coffee over the fire. Now silence. The bandits had ridden off south toward the sun. Clara had seen their dust trail vanish over the ridge. Men in greasy coats, dust masks, and rifles slung low, like wolves after a kill. She counted 9, maybe 10. Hard to tell through the blur of smoke and tears. She sat up slowly, every joint creaking like a wagon wheel on frost. Her legs trembled as she stood, Levi still cradled close. The world swam. Blood roared in her ears. But she walked because there was no other choice. Charred wood cracked beneath her boots. A half-burned wagon still smoldered, wheels melted to blackened hoops. Bodies lay scattered, twisted in the shapes death made of them. Faces frozen in horror, hands still clutching useless tools, eyes wide to a sky that did not care. Clara stopped beside Mary's body. The other woman's shawl had caught fire. One of her shoes was missing. Her mouth gaped open as though she were trying to sing one last hymn. Clara dropped to her knees and reached out with shaking fingers, but there was nothing left to fix. She could only close Mary's eyes and whisper a name. "I'm sorry," she said, but the words were too small. She found the baby girl Mary had carried, a tiny scrap wrapped in muslin. The child had not survived. Clara folded her hand over the baby's chest and sat still until the sun reached its peak. When she rose again, she was no longer the same woman who had climbed into that wagon 2 weeks ago, full of foolish hope and borrowed courage. Her boots left tracks through the dust and ash. She found food where she could, a can of beans kicked from a wagon bed, a scorched water skin. She tucked it all into a canvas satchel and tied Levi to her chest with Mary's shawl. Then she took the sharpest knife she could find from a dead man's belt and stepped into the wild. The desert stretched out before her, gold and merciless. Heat shimmered off the rocks, and vultures croaked from above, eyeing her with interest. She walked. Each step was a prayer, each breath a vow. Behind her, the dead whispered in the wind. Ahead, only the unknown waited. 2 days passed. Nights brought no comfort. The cold sank into her bones, and Levi cried for milk she could barely give. Her body ached. Her lips cracked. Once, she thought she saw a rider watching from the ridge, but when she blinked, the shape was gone. Clara's world narrowed to one thing. Forward. She followed a dry creek bed, then a game trail, then a line of telegraph poles broken by weather and time. Somewhere ahead, there would be a town. She hoped. By the 5th morning, her legs refused to carry her. She collapsed beneath a twisted pinyon tree. Levi curled beside her, whimpering like a pup. Clara stared up at the branches. A hawk watched her from above, head cocked in disdain. "Go ahead," she rasped, her tongue dry as parchment. "Eat us. Might save us both the trouble. Levi cried louder, and her heart cracked anew. She reached for the water skin. Empty. The sun mocked her from above. She closed her eyes. Something moved. Not the wind. Not a buzzard. Boots. Heavy. Deliberate. She pulled her knife and rose to her knees, swaying. The man who stepped into view was wrapped in a duster coat the color of old bone. A wide-brimmed hat shadowed his face, and a rifle hung loose at his side. He moved like someone who'd forgotten how to fear. Clara held her blade tight. "You gonna kill me, lady?" he asked, voice rough as gravel. "You ain't even got the strength to blink." Clara said nothing. He took a step closer, eyed the baby, then the knife. "Stealing my jerky's one thing," he muttered, "but pointing a blade while looking like a ghost, that's just poor manners." Clara blinked. He tossed something at her feet. A strip of dried meat. "Eat. Then we'll talk." She didn't trust him, but Levi's cry made the decision for her. She chewed slowly, eyes never leaving him. He waited. When she finally spoke, her voice barely carried. "They killed everyone. I figured. I hit him. In the brush. They didn't see. That's good." He nodded. "You got grit." "Not many do." Clara studied him. The scar across his jaw ran deep and crooked, as if someone had once tried to take his face off. His eyes were pale blue, too calm for a man in this land. "What do you want?" "Just passing through." "Why help me?" He looked down at the baby, who'd stopped crying and now stared at him with wide, tired eyes. "Maybe I owe the world something." She didn't know what that meant. Didn't care. "Name's Jed," he said. She didn't give hers. "All right then," he said. "Suit yourself." He knelt beside the fireless camp and struck flint with calm precision. They didn't speak again until the stars came out. Levi slept between them. Clara sat with her knees drawn up, arms wrapped tight. Jed smoked a pipe that smelled faintly of mint and cedar. "They'll come back, you know," she said. He nodded. "They always come back." He looked at her. "You gonna run?" Clara shook her head. "I've done all the running I'm gonna do." Jed grinned. "Just a flicker." "That's so. I got a baby to protect. And a score to settle." He leaned back, pipe smoke curling around his head like fog. "Ain't many survive long once they go down that trail." "I don't plan to survive," Clara said softly. "I plan to win." Jed didn't answer right away. Eventually, he tipped his hat down over his eyes. "You get some sleep. Come sunrise, we'll ride." "I don't have a horse." "You do now." She watched him settle in, the fire crackling low. For the first time in days, the sky felt less empty. Still wide. Still cruel. But something had shifted. She leaned back, the night pressing in close. Her body screamed for rest, but her mind raced ahead, already sharpening. The bandits thought they'd left no survivors. They were wrong. And somewhere, Clara swore, they'd learned that a woman with nothing left is the most dangerous thing in the West. The wind picked up again, sifting ash through the brush, whispering across the plains. And the dust never settled. The sky cracked open with a pale dawn that brought no warmth, just the kind of brittle light that laid every scar bare. Clara woke with her back pressed to a rock. Levi curled beside her in a nest of blanket and shawl. The fire had died sometime in the night, but she hadn't felt the cold. Her dreams had been worse. Snatches of gunfire. Her name screamed through smoke. Her baby wrenched from her arms by faceless men in red scarves. Jed stood 20 feet away, his silhouette chiseled against the rising sun, coat fluttering like a crow's wing in the wind. He stared out at nothing, puffing slow on that same cedar-sweet pipe. No words passed between them. None were needed. Clara gathered Levi, strapped him to her chest again, and stood, knees weak but resolve firm. Her bones protested. Her boots felt filled with broken glass. But she didn't complain. Not anymore. Jed turned when he heard her stir. He tossed her a piece of hardtack, and she caught it mid-air without blinking. He gave a small grunt of approval. "You ride?" he asked, motioning to the pack-horse tethered to a mesquite tree. Clara nodded. She hadn't been born in a city, after all. Before her life got tangled up with marriage, death, and tragedy, she'd raced colts through the fields of Missouri with her brothers, scraped her knees on saddles, and eaten dust like the rest of them. "Good," Jed muttered, swinging up onto his own mount. "We got ground to cover, and I ain't dragging you. They rode. The land changed as they traveled. Dry hills rolling into canyons. Creek beds twisting like veins across a sun-scarred earth. The only sound was the hooves striking dirt and the wind whispering its ancient grief through the cottonwoods. Clara didn't ask where they were going. It didn't matter. She needed distance. She needed a place where the weight of her grief wouldn't crush her into the dirt. Jed, for all his silence, was watchful. He'd look back every so often, not at her, but at Levi, as if measuring something. Clara saw that he favored one leg, that his left boot was patched 3 times over, and that he never rode without his rifle resting across the pommel. A man built by caution, the kind who didn't leave tracks unless he wanted to. 2 nights later, a storm rolled in fast and mean. They took shelter in a shallow cave riddled with soot and old bones. As lightning split the sky, Clara wrapped Levi tighter and sat with her back to the wall, watching Jed kindle a fire with flint and instinct. Rain battered the entrance like it meant to break through. When the wind howled loud enough to swallow her voice, she spoke anyway. "I saw one of their faces," she said. Jed didn't look up before he pulled the trigger. Red hair, big as a mule. Logan like he was at a fair. Jed scraped the steel across the flint again, catching a spark. "Red Dalton. You know him?" "Yeah, rode with him once." That silenced her for a beat. Jed finally turned toward her, firelight flickering in the hollows of his cheeks. "Long time ago, before I learned the price." She studied him, the way his face seemed carved from regret. "You help him do what they did." No, his voice was iron, but I didn't stop it neither. He let the silence settle again. Clara held Levi close, feeling his breath against her collarbone. "What changed you?" she asked. Jed tossed a dry twig onto the growing flame. It snapped in half with a brittle crack. "They killed someone I loved. Thought I'd get even. Turns out revenge don't fill the hole. Just digs it deeper." Clara leaned forward, eyes hard. "I don't want to fill the hole. I want to burn the bastards who made it." Jed gave a short, dry laugh. "You got fire, I'll give you that." The wind screamed louder, and the cave flickered with shadows. "I can't keep running," Clara whispered. "I ain't built for hiding in caves and nursing wounds. I need to know they'll pay." Jed stared into the flames for a long time. "There's a town, maybe 2 days' ride from here. No name on the sign, but it's where the Dalton gang likes to spend their coin. Cards, whiskey, horse. If he's still running with the same dogs, we'll find him there." She nodded, already reaching for her coat. "Hold on," Jed said. "You waltz in there with a baby on your back. They'll gut you for sport. You want to do this right. You learn to stalk your prey first." "I ain't got time." Jed's eyes flashed. "You got nothing but time. You rush this, you end up dead, or worse. You want to carve their names into hell, you start with patience." Clara stared at him, shaking with rage. But she said nothing more. In the morning, they rode again. This time, Jed began teaching. He showed her how to track a man by boot print, how to listen for the birds that stop singing when strangers pass, how to gut a rabbit without wasting a drop of meat. He made her shoot at pine knots from 50 feet, over and over, until her arms ached and her fingers blistered. He taught her how to sit still for hours, breathing slow, letting the desert hide her like a snake in sand. At night, he told stories. Not many, but enough. There was one about a boy who tried to rob a train and ended up tied to the tracks by the very woman he'd tried to charm. Another about a gambler who cheated death with a deck of aces carved from bone. Clara laughed once, just once, when Jed muttered about a preacher's wife who outdrank a bar full of lawmen. "Don't know if half of it's true," she said, smiling for the first time in weeks. "Hell, I don't either," Jed said. "But it passes the time." And time passed. A week later, they reached the nameless town nestled in a cradle of rock and dust, its main street lined with saloons, brothels, and broken dreams. It stank of sweat and horses and cheap whiskey. Clara wore a borrowed hat and kept Levi wrapped against her ribs, swaddled tight and quiet as a prayer. Jed walked with a limp now, or maybe he always had. Clara couldn't tell. He moved like a man waiting for his past to catch up. They split at the edge of town. Jed went to the saloon to drink and listen. Clara sat outside the general store, pretending to nurse, though her hand never strayed far from her belt. By dusk, Jed returned with eyes sharp as glass. "He's here," he said. "Red Dalton, full of whiskey and dice, bragged gin like a fool." Clara's heart pounded so hard she could hear it in her ears. Jed saw it. "Not tonight. I can't wait," she snapped. "Yes, you can. And you will." She turned on him, face fierce. "He helped kill everyone I knew. Left Mary to burn with her baby in her arms. He doesn't get another night." Jed's jaw tensed. "You want to take him? Do it clean. I'll get you close." They waited until the moon was high. Red Dalton stumbled from the saloon, laughing with two others. He wore a green neckerchief and a pair of pistols on his belt, walking like a man who'd never heard of consequence. Jed guided Clara down the alley behind the livery. "There," he whispered. "He'll piss in that trough like he always does. You got one shot." Clara didn't answer. She crept forward, heart pounding, fingers white-knuckled around the grip of her pistol. Her breath felt like fire in her throat. Dalton unbuckled his belt, humming some foul tune. She stepped out. He turned. Recognition flashed in his eyes, but only for a second. Clara pulled the trigger. The shot echoed like a thunderclap, sending pigeons shrieking into the night. Dalton dropped where he stood, mouth frozen open in shock, blood painting the dirt red. Jed grabbed her arm and pulled her back into the shadows as voices shouted from the saloon. They ran. By dawn, they were 10 miles out, and the town behind them was just another scar on the horizon. They didn't speak for a long time. When they stopped to rest, Clara sat beneath a juniper tree and stared at the horizon. "I thought I'd feel more," she said. Jed handed her a canteen. "You feel it later. I thought I'd be satisfied. You got more names, don't you?" She nodded slowly. He looked off into the distance. "Then it ain't over." She cradled Levi, whose eyes opened just enough to blink up at her, as if he knew she'd crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. She kissed his forehead, closed her eyes, and whispered one down. Jed nodded, chewing on a blade of grass. "You ever wonder if revenge turns us into the thing we hate?" he asked. Clara looked at him, her eyes steady. "No, I think it reminds us who we are." And somewhere beyond the edge of the hills, the dust rose again, carrying with it the echoes of something old and burning. The hunt had begun. The road south forked at a crooked signpost, so weather-beaten it could have been part of the desert itself. Clara stared at it, the letters long worn down by wind and sun. One way led to where a mining camp Jed had marked as long abandoned. The other twisted through the hills where the next name on her list was said to hole up, a man known only as Cale, though the Dalton boys called him Whip for reasons no one ever laughed while explaining. Jed spat into the dust and tugged his hat low. "He's worse than Dalton," he said, "mean in ways that don't have nothing to do with bullets." Clara didn't flinch. "That why you're worried?" "I'm not worried," he said. "I'm old. There's a difference." They rode through the split, following the canyon path. It narrowed into a chokehold of rock and scrub, and the sun beat down with a copper glare. Levi slept against Clara's chest, lulled by the rhythm of hoofbeats and heat. He was bigger now, still mostly quiet but strong in the arms, eyes bright. He was her reason. The rest of it, blood, revenge, reckoning, none of it mattered if she didn't keep him safe. Clara had changed, and not just in the lean way her face had sharpened or the calluses that lined her hands. Something deeper had settled in her bones. She didn't cry anymore. She didn't hope. But she believed in the list she carried, in the names she etched into memory like gravestones waiting to be filled. Cale was next. They made camp near an old telegraph pole long snapped in half, where a single crow perched like a watchman. Jed cleaned his rifle by moonlight while Clara packed jerky and dry oats into a sack. Neither spoke of what came next. They didn't have to. It was a rhythm now like breath and blood. Hunt. Kill. Move on. "You think your boy'll ever know?" Jed asked finally, voice low, flicking ash into the fire. Clara looked at him. "Know what? What you did. What you became." She didn't answer right away. "If I do it right," she said, "he won't need to." Jed nodded once, then turned back to his rifle. They moved at dawn, tracking fresh signs through the chaparral. Broken branches. Boot prints. Horse dung not 2 days old. Whip Cale wasn't far. The hills turned rugged, knife-edged ridges with shadows sharp as blades. Clara's horse balked near a bluff where vultures circled low. They crept up, rifles drawn. Below, in a ravine thick with mesquite, a camp was nestled against a sheer rock wall. 3 men, 1 woman, all armed. A mule loaded with sacks and whiskey. Clara spotted him immediately, Cale. His back was to them, shirt off, scars coiled across it like vines. He cracked a whip lazily at a stump, sipping from a bottle with his free hand. "He's got no guard up," Clara whispered. "Drunk," Jed said. "And stupid. Let's keep it that way." They waited until dusk. Jed looped around the ridge, rifle in hand. Clara approached from the north, silent as wind on bone. She left Levi tucked in the brush, swaddled in her coat, rocks around him to keep the snakes off. She moved fast. The first man didn't even see her. A strike to the temple with her rifle, but dropped him like a felled tree. The woman reached for her revolver. Clara shot her through the chest before her fingers touched iron. The gunfire ripped the quiet apart. Cale spun, whip in one hand, pistol in the other. Jed fired from the ridge, missed. Clara ran forward, heart hammering. Cale saw her. Well, he slurred, grinning wide. "Ain't you the wagon ghost?" She didn't answer, just leveled her weapon. He was fast, too fast. His whip lashed across her wrist, knocking the gun aside. Pain split her fingers open, but she didn't cry out. He came at her then, whip coiling like a snake. She ducked, rolled, came up with a knife. The same one from the massacre. The same blade she'd used to cut bread for Mary. She slashed low. Missed. He laughed. "You want to dance, little widow?" Another crack. Her coat tore open. Jed fired again, hit the mule instead. The animal screamed and bolted, crashing into the rocks. Clara lunged. She caught him in the thigh. The knife sank into the hilt. Cale howled and struck her with the pistol grip, sending her sprawling. Blood filled her mouth. Her ears rang. He staggered over, dragging the whip. "I was there," he said. "I remember you, hiding like a rabbit while we did God's work." She spit blood at his boots. "God ain't never heard your name." He raised the pistol. Jed's bullet hit him clean through the shoulder. Cale reeled, screaming. Clara lunged again. This time, she went for the throat. The blade sliced deep. He fell, choking on his own breath, hands scrabbling uselessly at the dust. She knelt there, watching him die. No rage, no mercy, just silence. Jed limped down the hill. His side bled, torn open by a ricochet. "You good?" he asked, voice rough. "I'm fine." He looked at her bloodied hands. "Sure don't look it." She wiped the knife on her trousers and stood. "We done here?" she asked. Jed glanced around at the carnage. "Yeah, for now." They buried the woman. The men, they left for the scavengers. By the time the moon was high, they were miles away. The road twisted again. Clara sat by the fire, feeding Levi crushed beans from her fingers. He gurgled, tugged her hair. She smiled, barely, but it was there. Jed watched, silent. "I never held a gun before the wagon," she said after a while. "I used to mend shirts and churn butter. Braid Mary's hair. I was going to open a school." Jed puffed on his pipe. "You still could." She shook her head. "Not after this." "Then make sure it means something." She looked at him. "Why do you help me?" "Really?" Jed leaned back. "I had a daughter once. Name was Elsie. Bright-eyed, full of spit. They burned her and her mama in a barn outside Santa Rosa. I didn't get there in time." Clara said nothing. Jed looked at the fire. "You remind me of her. Not just your face. The way you fight." She studied him. "You think we're going to make it?" "I don't think that matters. What matters is we don't stop." They broke camp at dawn. The next name was the sheriff. The man who'd paid Dalton's gang to clear out the wagon trail. To make room for a new rail line. To bury the settlers and their claims under fire and ash. His name was Barrett, and he lived behind a badge. Clara rode with the wind at her back. Levi pressed close, her knife sharp and heart steady. She wasn't just hunting now. She was coming home. The town of Calico Ridge sat quiet beneath the midday sun, its buildings slouched and tired from decades of heat, dust, and secrets. Wind stirred loose grit down the main street, slipping under porch steps and around crooked hitching posts. A dog barked once and went silent. Nothing moved that wasn't meant to. Clara sat on the ridge above the town, her eyes locked on the sheriff's office. Her rifle lay across her lap, hand steady, heart cold. Levi slept strapped against her back, his breath warm and even. Jed crouched beside her, chewing a strip of tobacco, watching the same building with the same dead-eyed calm he always wore before blood spilled. "Two deputies," he said. "Saw one take coffee out to the front porch. Other one's inside." "And Barrett?" Clara asked. Jed spat. "Big bastard in the rocking chair. Ain't moved in an hour. Probably thinks he's already won." Clara squinted through the heat haze. The rocking chair creaked. Barrett's boots rested on the rail, his hat tipped low. He looked like a man without a care in the world. But Clara knew better. A man didn't hire murderers and burn wagons unless he feared the people living in them. "He doesn't get to die quiet," she said. Jed nodded. "Reckon he won't." They'd planned this over 10 long, bitter nights. Clara had taken names, drawn maps, watched patrols. Jed had bribed a stable boy, cut a water line, loosened saddle straps. They didn't have an army. Didn't need one. Just two ghosts with nothing left to lose. Clara rose, dusted off her duster, checked the knife in her boot and the revolver at her hip. Her fingers brushed the tiny carved toy horse tied to her satchel, the last thing Mary ever gave Levi. She tucked it inside her coat. "You sure?" Jed asked. "No," Clara said, "but I'm going anyway." He smiled, the kind of smile that knew pain and wore it like armor. "That's the only kind that matters." They split at the edge of town. Jed went south, toward the telegraph station, to cut the wire. No backup, no warnings. Clara walked straight down Main Street. Her boots rang against the boards like drumbeats. People watched from behind curtains, eyes wide and whispering. No one stopped her. No one dared. She climbed the steps of the sheriff's office, the wood groaning beneath her weight. Barrett didn't look up. "You lost?" he asked, voice low and thick, like syrup poured over poison. "No," she said, "but you are." He tipped his hat back, revealing a ruddy face and a thick beard speckled with gray. His eyes were small, mean, and amused. "Well, hell," he said, sitting up, "if it ain't the Hollis widow. Thought you was bones in the dirt by now." "You thought wrong." Barrett stood. He was taller than she remembered, broader. The kind of man who filled a room without trying. "You're lucky I don't hang you for walking in with a weapon," he said, motioning to the revolver on her hip. "You're lucky I didn't already use it." He grinned. "I always liked that fire. Shame you had to go and waste it on ghosts." "You pay Dalton," she said, voice like steel dragged across stone. "You hired killers to clear the trail. Left women, children, everyone to burn." He shrugged. "Wasn't personal. Railroad needed land. You folks were in the way. They were people. They were obstacles." Her hand twitched toward her hip. Barrett saw it. In a blink, he moved, drawn revolver cocked. Fast for a big man. Clara ducked behind the post as the first shot cracked. Splinters flew. She rolled to the side, fired twice, missed once, clipped his shoulder with the second. He grunted, cursed, and staggered back inside. The deputies came running. Jed shot the first one before his boots hit the porch. The second made it through the door, gun drawn. Clara followed, kicking the door open just as the second deputy turned. They fired at the same time. Her bullet hit his chest. His clipped her arm. She fell against the wall, gasping, vision blurring. Levi cried behind her, sharp, terrified. Barrett roared from behind the desk. "Enough games!" He rose with a shotgun, eyes wild, shoulder bleeding, fury etched into every step. Clara fumbled for her second pistol. Jed burst through the door, rifle raised. Barrett swung the shotgun, fired. Jed took the full blast in the chest. He dropped. Clara screamed. Barrett turned to reload. Smirking. Slow. Certain. Clara rose, blood down her arm, hands shaking. She remembered Mary burning. She remembered Levi screaming in the brush. She remembered the knife, and the wagon, and the dust that never settled. She pulled the trigger. One shot. Barrett's smirk froze. He staggered back, mouth open, blood blooming across his vest. Clara walked forward, step by step, until she stood over him. He looked up at her like he still didn't believe it. "You ain't nobody," he gasped. "No," she said. "I'm what's left." She fired again. His head snapped back. Silence followed. Clara dropped the pistol, ran to Jed. He lay on his side, coughing blood, eyes unfocused. "Damn fool," he wheezed. "You're all right," she said. "You're fine. We'll get help." Jed chuckled, deep and broken. "Ain't no help for a hole this big." She pressed her hands to the wound. "You stay with me, you hear? I told you," he whispered. "Reckon you'd be the death of me." His hand found hers. His eyes closed. And just like that, the man who'd taught her how to hunt, how to survive, how to kill was gone. Clara sat beside him until Levi's cries pulled her back to the world. She held her boy close and rocked him in the center of the ruined office. Outside, the town was silent. No posse came. No judge. Just the wind and the ash. In the days that followed, word spread like fire in tall grass. The sheriff was dead. His corruption exposed. Ledgers burned, bribes uncovered. The town judge took one look at Clara's bandaged arm, her baby boy, and the dead men on the floor, and said nothing worth remembering. She rode out with Levi and Jed's horse trailing behind. She buried Jed on the ridge, where he could see the sun rise. Carve his name in a piece of driftwood. Jedediah Crow, a good man in a wicked land. Clara never looked back. She found a stretch of earth where nothing had yet died. Built a cabin with her own hands. Planted a tree beside it. Raised Levi with stories of courage, grit, and fire. Of a time when the world burned and a woman rose from the ash. And when the wind blew, it carried her name across the plains like thunder still rolling. The West never forgot. It carved its history in blood and smoke, but sometimes, just sometimes, it remembered the ones who survived it. And if this story moved you, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments.